What is the creepiest thing you have experienced that you still think about to this day? My brother had a party in college at his place on campus. They had trailers that were on campus and were a part of housing. There were a bunch of parties that night in that area. I was there for a little bit, but was still in HS and had hockey practice in the morning, so had to get home earlier. My brother and his buddy were on the porch late at night, like 3 to 4 am, when in the distance, in the dark, they saw someone randomly running through the night with a football. My brother's buddy even yelled out, "Run Forrest, run." Next morning the police knocked on everyone's door to interview the people who lived in the area. Apparently a student was decapitated and the body was found near the campus, but the head was missing. There was a massive search, and a few weeks later, they were looking at the track and field complex behind where my brother lived, and they found the head when emptying a porta potty at the track. My brother is fairly certain the random guy in the dark running with the football was actually the guy running with the head. Edit. I said it was a student who was killed. I meant to say it was a student who did it. The victim was a 13-year-old female. On a family vacation, when I was a kid, renting a beach condo. The unit next door was a regular residence, and we met the family. Nice people. They were leaving at the end of the week for their own trip, but the daughter had to work one more overnight shift as a nurse. The dad and the younger kids left that day, and the mother and daughter were going to leave the next morning and catch up with them. That morning, as we were packing up our own stuff to go home, we started hearing sirens out on the road in front of the condos. There were several emergency vehicles outside, and eventually an air evac helicopter landed on the road and took off with a gurney, rolled out of the unit next to us. A while later, we got the story. The daughter had come home from her shift and found the mother beaten to death with a hammer or something similar. We hadn't heard or seen anything, even though we shared a wall. The creepiest part was that the officers found that the killer had accessed the house by the back porch door, facing the beach. The bedroom me and my brothers were sleeping in was down on the ground floor, with the same porch door leading out to the beach, only a few feet away from that same door and only separated by a waist-high rail. Talking about it later, we weren't even sure we had locked the door that night. When I was about 8 or 9, my mom's friends took us to see the puppy they were going to buy. The owner offered us to walk the parent dogs, 2 Rottweilers. I remember their names till this day. They were super friendly and walked off leash with the 2 kids of my mom's friend and myself. When we arrived in a grassy area surrounded by trees, a tall guy approached us. He grabbed my shoulder and the dogs went completely nuts. I remember he had a mirror and tried shining light into the dog's eyes. The mother dog stayed circling me while I ran to the house, and the other dog chased after this guy until he was gone. It was terrifying, but what really stands by me is that those dogs didn't know me from before, yet they protected me and my friends as if their lives depended on it. Edit. The man was wearing one of those long, leather trench coats and his mirror was very small. So I assume he wasn't randomly strolling the woods with a mirror. I think we got lucky that day, and I'm forever grateful for those dogs. I was in the Navy stationed inland because I was in a school. I had a friend drop me off at a store, and when I was done started walking back to the base. I noticed this car driving slowly in the road, keeping pace with me. Some weird guy was smiling at me. I'm also a guy. More Than a Feeling was playing loud. Eventually the car went ahead of me, but then there it was on a side street waiting for me to pass. Again he drove next to me slowly with the same song playing. This scenario went on for about 7 or 8 blocks, same song playing over and over. I finally made it to a nearby mall and went inside. I stayed in one place inside the mall to make sure I lost him. I was pretending to talk to someone on a payphone. Suddenly there he was inside the mall, peeking around a corner. As soon as he turned around, I ran out of the mall through the closest exit and ran about another 2 blocks to the Navy base. I never saw him again, but it creeped me out so much that every time I hear More Than a Feeling playing, it reminds me of the experience. I, myself, have a story about this song. I was driving to school with my boyfriend to our college campus. I had a feeling we should not go to class that day. From the moment I got out of bed, through brushing my teeth, to picking him up at his house and saying we shouldn't go to the campus today. We took the highway there. I missed the first exit, and when I took the next one to turn around we almost got creamed by a Peterbilt and were driven off the road. The bad feeling persisted. Then we almost missed the turn towards the college parking lot. I've made this drive for a year. WTF is wrong with me today? Boston's It's More Than a Feeling is playing on the radio, and I glance down for a second to adjust my heater and all I hear is whoa, whoa, whoa from my boyfriend in the passenger seat. I hit my brakes before even looking up. I look up as we're sliding on wet pine needles, my abs working its tail off, and say oh shit, as I rear-ended a Kia Sportage. She had slammed on her brakes in an attempt to avoid hitting a pedestrian who thought it was a good idea to dart across a very busy 4-lane road. That was the day of my first accident. I had a feeling it would be a bad day. It was more than a feeling. 10 years later I still love that song though. When I was in college, 20 plus years ago, I had a desk chair that was on rollers, the kind where the pedestal ends in a 5-armed star with a roller at each end. The arms of the star were made of hard-formed plastic and were pretty thick. I was up very late one night cramming for a final and went to bed for no more than an hour or so to take a nap. When I got up I went back and sat in the chair and immediately realized something was wrong. All 5 of the hard plastic arms were warped and bent at almost 90 degrees, all in the same direction. It certainly wasn't like that an hour prior when I left it. Again, this was hard brittle, thick plastic. It shouldn't bend. It would just snap under enough force. I suppose maybe, if you heated it up to soften it enough, you could reshape it, but how could that have happened? I lived alone, doors were locked. It'd be the most bizarre prank in the world to break into somebody's apartment with a blowtorch or something to reshape their chair legs. I kept that chair for years and years, even though it was now basically unusable, because I thought that one day I'd be staring at it and the answer would come to me. I have absolutely zero belief in anything supernatural and nothing else bizarre has ever happened to me, but I think about this constantly. My wife and I went to CreepyCon in Knoxville this year to listen to one of our friends give a panel. On our last day in town we were meeting up with one of my wife's cousins for brunch. We are parking in a lot across the street when a guy walks up to me. He was trying to tell me to park on some side street because it was free, but my wife was already at the pay machine. Plus, I had already parked and really didn't want to risk a ticket on the word of a stranger. Well, he didn't really care about where we were parking, he just wanted to make some money. He had something he wanted to sell me and pulled a knife out. I stepped back and looked at my wife, who stayed back. Don't worry man, I'm not going to stab you. Do you want to buy this knife? I told him that I didn't really want a knife and that we didn't carry cash. In his defense, he didn't stab me. My grandma had Alzheimer's and maybe dementia when she lived with us. Her room was also like right down the hallway from mine, so it was really common for me to be woken up in the night to her laughing, screaming, or talking. One night things were different. I could hear her talking and someone responding. I got up to take a close look, and I noticed when I was getting out of bed my dog looked like something was wrong, which was weird to me. I went up to the door to hear things better. She was paralyzed on her right side, so I know this was just my mom coming to help her with something, but the responding voice was a male voice. My dad didn't live with us, and I don't have any brothers, nor did this sound like her own voice at all. My first thought was that it was my uncle, but why would my uncle be at my house? If he was, then there was something wrong with my grandma, because he would only come this late when there was an emergency. I also would have heard him coming through the front door. I put myself against the wall in a way that I could see into my grandma's room, but anyone in the room couldn't see me. Unless they were at the room door, I couldn't see anyone except my grandma's feet. I got close enough to make out what they were saying now, but what made this weirder is that my grandma wasn't speaking English and neither was the person they were speaking Farsi. This was the conversation I heard. Voice: they have been treating you well. Grandma: yes, they have been treating me very well. Voice: who is the guy in the hallway? Grandma: that is my grandson, has a good kid. Voice: I think the dog sees me. At this point I freaked out and made my way back to my room. I thought I was in a nightmare or something, and I wanted to wake up. My first thought was that I could pinch myself. That didn't work, so I tried to poke myself with my knife. I did it pretty hard because it left a mark in my hand that stayed for a few days. I tried to go back to sleep, not listen, but I couldn't. I watched the sunlight come up through my window with this very uneasy feeling that I was being watched. My grandma lived for another 5 years with us and a few more minor weird things happened, but this one always stuck with me.